Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Baddie. I'm your host, Brooke Sweetheart, and I'm so excited. Today, I am joined by my friend, Brian Pulliam. He is the founder of Refactor Coaching. Brian, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
As we get started, I'd love if you could just kind of get started and share a little bit more about Refactor Coaching and also your background and your very impressive career that you've had in tech too.
Sure. So let's see, where should I start? I grew up during the 80s. I turned 51 this year, so I'm like a fossil. And I grew up in a time when like games were like a very formative part of my childhood. So I'm talking, people have heard of the Atari 2600. I started with the Atari 800. I was doing BASIC probably when I was like 12 years old, not because my dad forced me to do it, but he bought a computer. And I was like, what does this work and how do I make these things happen? So I had interest at a young age and wanted to get into game development. And so went to school, went to a liberal arts school, got a computer science degree, did game development for children's software for 5 to 7 years. I worked for, so some of the people that are in the audience might recognize like Humongous Entertainment or more likely the names of the games they played. So Backyard Baseball, Spy Fox, Pajama Sam, Freddy Fish, Putt Putt, like all of those games. I worked at Humongous Entertainment that was responsible for all those children's software games. So that was super fun. I sort of got laid off very unexpectedly from that job. Did not expect it. It was a very traumatic experience. Took me a while to process that and understand what to do with that. And from there, I kind of went into more traditional engineering roles. And so I've been a TPM for about a decade. Most of that time was at Microsoft. Been a software engineer for 5 to 7 years. Most of that was in game development. Actually, ironically pivoted from TPM roles to engineering manager at Zillow and worked there for about 4 years and then worked at Coinbase for about 1. So about 26 years in tech, feels like about 1,000. About halfway through my tech experience, I sort of fell in love with something I didn't expect. My wife voluntold me to help her coach a volleyball team because she and I met playing volleyball.
Aww.
And I was like, this is going to be stupid. I got to teach these kids that suck at volleyball how to play. Like, I just was not looking forward to it like at all. And, and I couldn't have been more wrong. It was the most fulfilling thing I've ever done, like to date in my career. And I remember thinking like, wait a minute, like this thing I don't get paid for is way more fulfilling than the way I've made money for 14 years in my career. Like something's wrong. Like, how come I don't feel like this when I do this work? And so I started thinking like, how do I combine the fulfillment of coaching, but do it in something that takes advantage of my tech industry background? And I got myself a career coach. Her name's Melissa. She helped me come up with a plan, which eventually led to what I'm doing now, which is being a career coach for people in tech. And given my varied background, I just help people mainly with 3 things. Like land jobs is like the vast majority of my clients right now. I've helped maybe 90 people land jobs in the last 3 years.
Amazing.
Some of them are more junior. One of them, even this week, is returning to Google. I helped her negotiate $150,000 increase to her comp for the first year.
Oh, yeah.
So full range of people I help, but I love that I get to combine the 26 years in tech with the 10 years in coaching together. And I really love doing it and not having an employer because it means I get to be like very open and honest and have unfiltered chats with the people that I help. That part is really fulfilling for me.
I can only imagine. And I'm actually so glad that you went ahead and dove into that because that was going to be my first question was what made you want to transition into coaching? And man, that's such a great story. I can resonate in the sense of discovering things that you're passionate about, but it not necessarily being what you do that makes you money. And I mean, that was a big part of why I decided to switch to the tech industry in one of the most tumultuous, crazy markets. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it anyway. It made me happy. I enjoyed solving problems and building and creating something with my own hands, with just me and a keyboard. That was very powerful for me.
Yes.
And it really was the first time that I remembered feeling that very strong sense of fulfillment and being very proud of what I was doing. And because for me, I spent a long time in my previous career as a recruiter, just very much going through the motions. It was fine. It was secure, but I'd spent too much of my life not having that. So when I found it, I was like, okay, I gotta hold on to this and figure it out. And now it's evolved kind of in the same shoes as you, where I'm at this point like my own boss too, and it's actually really great. I feel extremely fortunate that I get to do what I love to do, but just as you said, kind of on my terms, and also pick and choose a lot of times my hours, my schedule. I do a lot of stuff with people internationally, and it's like one of the coolest things ever, but also the people I get to help too and share my resources with, even though I'm newer to the industry, of course, but mainly with the personal branding and navigating this tough market. You know, a large chunk of my audience, Brian, are other career switchers and people trying to break into tech, much like I did. So it's become a real mission for me to try and help people who want to do things that I wanted to do too, but they're facing a lot of these obstacles. And I'm sure one next thing I wanted to get into with your coaching is how it's sort of changed in the last few years with this dramatic downturn and in the market. I want to get some insights on your perspective of what you've been seeing.
Yeah, for sure. So when I was at Microsoft and Zillow and Coinbase, I was sort of indoctrinated into this concept that I'm sure you're familiar with, like A/B testing, right? That we should run experiments on what we're going to do because human behavior is not always logical or intuitive. And it can be really expensive to build out a feature and then realize it's not doing what you expected. So
Yes.
for those that aren't familiar, who are newer to the industry, it's like the scientific method, like dipping your toes into the water and just making sure you see things that are encouraging before you change a feature for everybody. So a part of A/B testing is ramping up traffic on the new version of a feature and seeing whether it does better. You don't just flip the switch. And I think that's a concept people outside of tech aren't super familiar with, like ramping up traffic. But I was thinking about all of the things I've learned about A/B testing and how to de-risk things that we were building to make sure they would be valuable and ultimately profitable and make billionaires richer, really. I was like, well, if I like helping people, like making my CEO richer is not as deeply fulfilling as it would be is if I could help individuals with their career, because that became the most lasting impact that I cared about. Like I loved tech for 10 years. I loved process for about 10 years, and tech and process just change over time. But teaching somebody how to do better in an interview is something that they get to carry with them for the rest of their life. And so
Absolutely.
it was hard for me to walk away and say, I really want to make Coinbase another $10 million. And I'm like, okay, well, people are buying crypto. That's fine. But I was just struck by how much I could help other people. So I put on my TPM hat and I was kind of like, what if I A/B tested the interview process?
Okay.
Like, what if I A/B tested resume formats? What if I A/B tested how you talk to a recruiter in a call? What if I A/B tested the stories you tell, the questions you ask, the way you practice for interview prep, DSA and system design? And what if I just started tracking that to see whether or not there was a consistently better set of tactics that would increase conversion rate, like just like a conversion funnel, right? Like in marketing, like, and I started to see some patterns, and those patterns are things now that I help other people with. And so I think I took a lot of what made me successful as a PM and then applied that in the workplace and said, well, it's more fulfilling for me to teach a Brooke or a Brian, like how to talk about the things that set them apart and make them uniquely valuable, because that's not as likely to change year over year. And so teaching you it once, there's just incredible ROI with it. And it's led to some really amazing things for some of my clients.
I love that. And yeah, the concept of the basic fundamental principles, as I call it, especially whenever it does come to interviewing. I mean, I can talk to this because I worked as a recruiter for 10 years. I wasn't in the tech industry, just for transparency. I actually worked in manufacturing, but still worked with engineers. And yeah, it's work. It is work to get good at interviewing and learning how to sell yourself. And honestly, I think a good way to look at it, an analogy I would often use whenever I was talking to the candidates I was presenting, is it is sales. And right now you're the product. You know, you're trying to convince this potential employer to choose you over everyone else. And it's great if you look amazing on paper and you do have all of this background, but if you can't articulate, and also, to be honest, if you can't get people to like you, I mean, that's a huge factor too. And I think that that's something that, in my experience with entering tech, is kind of not talked about enough too, because it's still human beings making these decisions.
Yeah, thank God. Like ChatGPT is not making hiring decisions yet.
Oh
So
my gosh. No, and I love that that's the case. I'm very thankful, but I'm just telling you right now, if there are three candidates that are very similarly aligned as far as skill sets, and all three talk to the hiring manager, they're going to pick the one that they got on with the most. I mean, that just time and time again, unless there's some crazy reason not to, that's the candidate that gets it. And, one thing I have kind of also learned with speaking to some other seasoned professionals, much like yourself, Brian, that have been in tech for a while, is how important the communication aspect is, and how oftentimes that seems to be overlooked time and time again, which is wild to me, but it's essential.
yeah. Yeah, it is a skill in and of itself. And so the way I describe it to clients is being good at interviewing is like the career version of having good survival skills. Like, if you were like on Naked and Afraid or one of these Alaska shows, it's like if you drop you into any area,
Yeah.
you're not going to enjoy the next 3 days, but you probably won't die compared to someone who doesn't have those skills. And so being good at interviewing is a way to sort of encourage you to not stay in a role where you feel stuck. And what then this market is really scary for a lot of people who even have jobs, because they're like, I hate my boss. My boss is a psychopath and I don't want to deal with my PM, and my DS person is a jerk, but I don't want to go look, or I don't want to quit without a new offer. And so the lack of interviewing skills is holding a lot of employed people back from seeking out something that would be a lot more fulfilling for them, right? And so that's something that I really love helping people with.
And another area that unfortunately I wish we weren't having to address, but the truth is that the layoff issue is really prevalent right now in the tech industry. And it's to be honest, I mean, just with my own journey, it's a part of why I decided to lean in very heavily into the Tech Baddie and trying to monetize elsewhere while still building, still learning, loving software engineering and coding.
But not one basket, multiple baskets.
Exactly. And that came from a tech mentor sitting me down, because I was in my own job search very aggressively. And I just wasn't getting the offers that I felt I deserved and wanted to be very transparent. But then my mentor said, okay, great. But even if you got that 6-figure offer today, right, and it's perfect and it's with a great company, whatever, everything, like you would have to stop doing a lot of what you've been doing. And for me, that was like the show and everything I'm doing online and these relationships and collabs that I've fallen in love with. And then also he said, and the truth is, and I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but it's not a guarantee. Even if you got that job offer today, it doesn't mean now you're just set, that now you don't have to worry about anything. You've reached that finish line. You have to continue to be proactive in case you are the next person that gets laid off or that company shuts down. And I mean, that's just a very real thing for a lot of people. And unfortunately, I know many even more seasoned people who have gone through layoffs recently, and they've been with those companies for a while, didn't see it coming. And there's, even as you touched on whenever you were laid off from your gaming dev role, and you mentioned how like traumatic that was. I mean, it is. It is. I think especially in corporate America, so much of our job can be tied to our identity. What we are is who we are. And when that happens, I think especially now, oh my God, like my biggest fear would be to try and log into my job and suddenly you can't get in, and just like, I would crash out. Okay. Like, I don't know about anyone else, but like, I don't know how people ever handle that with grace. Cause like, I would not be okay, but it's something that people kind of have to, unfortunately, think about.
Yeah. I think, so I want to touch on a couple things. So one is like, if you don't mind me sharing a picture,
please do.
My screen. I want to touch on one thing in particular that you mentioned. All right, can you see this?
It's loading. Yes. And for anyone who's listening and doesn't have the video, this show is on YouTube, by the way, so you get to see our beautiful faces and this picture.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll talk through it. So in case it's just audio only. So when we sit down and talk about a candidate, so I want to like pull back the covers a little bit about what it's like when you're interviewing like a candidate, and Brooke is a candidate. So most of the time we talk, the group of people that interviewed you will get together and talk about the results of your interview, usually the day after your last interview. That's called like a debrief, hiring debrief. Sometimes it's called hiring panel if those people were not the ones that interviewed you. So a company like Google, they don't even want the people who interviewed you to be part of the discussion. They want another layer of people. So,
Right.
like hiring panel, strangers reading what I wrote in in a document. Debrief is usually the people that actually interviewed you. The amount of time we spend in that 30-minute interview talking about your competence is a lot smaller than most people realize. And
Mm-hmm.
so for those that are watching on YouTube, we only spend maybe 5 minutes of a 30-minute interview talking about Brooke's technical capability or competence in the interview. Now, it's a really important 5 minutes. I don't want people to think it doesn't matter. If everybody goes around the room, a lot of times we put our thumbs out sideways. 1, 2, 3, the recruiter says go, and we go thumb up or thumb down, so we can't influence other people's decision.
Right. Okay.
If everybody's down, the meeting's over. Like, we don't need to talk. Like,
Sure.
if Brian bombed the interview. If everybody's up, there's actually not much point in talking either, but that's very rare. Most of the time,
Sure.
it's a combination of thumbs up and thumbs down.
Sure.
If Brooke is competent enough, we move on to talk about two other things that make up a much larger percentage of the conversation. And that is Brooke a psychopath, or do I want to work with her, right? Like, is she a brilliant jerk?
Yeah.
Because especially in this market, there's a lot more supply than demand. And
Yes.
so what I would call the coworker test is really important, which is kind of your likability comment from before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, it is important that you are good enough technically for them to move on to these other topics. But once you think you are competent enough, the best place to improve the results of getting offers is not in competence. It's actually in, can you tell good stories? Can you ask unique questions? Can you be seen as likable and want to be a coworker? And do you feel like a good fit for the company? / what do you bring to the role that other people don't? And a lot of times that's not like, I have 87 years of Rust experience. It's like, no, it's like you were a recruiter before. And so your ability to influence other people
Sure.
is much higher for Brooke than it is for other people that don't have that background. And so if you have difficult stakeholders that you have to work with, I would bet like $100 that Brooke has a great story about when she had to influence leadership, and she could lean on the stories from when she was a recruiter, and that would make her stand out, right?
Love
That's
that.
a lot more meaningful.
You're right, and people do want to work with people that they like. And like you said, if I'm the hiring manager, right, and I have the 1,000 applications, that I'm going through, that's absolutely a real factor, and it's something that people do need to be spending time on. So along those lines, I want to talk about your average client experiences as you operate your coaching business. Would you mind sharing what you feel are some of the greatest challenges that people are facing right now, or having maybe the hardest time trying to come to terms with or learn with from you?
Yeah. So let me think about this. Love to show visuals. I think
I love visuals too. That's great.
because tech people are kind of visual creatures, right? Like a lot of us got into tech because we like to look at a problem instead of hear about it. Like, that's why we're not English majors. And so I want to share like one other image. And this is really just a picture of the conversion funnel that I talked about before. So, but it's a little easier to see it. I'll walk through it for the people listening on video. Here we go. Okay, perfect. So when we talk about a conversion funnel, not everyone in tech knows about this. If you've been around marketing people, you kind of know. A conversion funnel is this idea of any multi-step process that doesn't have 100% completion rate that goes to the next step, kind of creates like a funnel picture where like it's almost like a hourglass with sand, right? So in interviews, like in getting offers, I think of 4 steps in order to get an offer. So when you talk about what is the typical client struggling with, most of the typical clients are struggling with the very top of this. They're struggling with, when they apply for a job, how do they get a call back from a recruiter, which strictly speaking is not always a call. It's usually an email, right? Hey, Brooke, I'd love to talk with you on the phone. I'm calling it a callback because I like to compare it to going to an audition, right, for some sort of play, or for a musical, because the odds are smaller these days in terms of your likelihood to convert. But there are being 4 steps: applying for a job, getting a call back, getting an interview, and getting an offer. I have found tactics that are best optimized at different steps of the process, right? It's not a surprise to most technical people that we don't look at your resume a lot in the interview
Yeah.
because somebody else has already done that. And
Yes.
so
Right.
your ability to answer 2 LeetCode hards in 45 minutes, which is ridiculous, or pass a system design interview, that is way more meaningful. That's what's on this sheet of paper. So the vast majority of the clients that I work with struggle with getting more callbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them also struggle with what to say when they talk with a recruiter. And I love recruiters. I think it's ridiculous that we make them do this recruiter screen because it's not a really high value conversation on either side, quite frankly. You know, a technical recruiter does not know as much as you do about your ability to do the job. And yet they have this Julius Caesar ability to like kill your chances at moving forward.
That's true.
But they are not as knowledgeable about what you will do. And so the way you approach a recruiter screen has to do, honestly, what I teach my clients to do is to take over that call as early as possible.
Okay.
And demonstrate competence and excitement, because 99% of tech people show up like they're at a funeral when they go talk to a recruiter. They're like quiet. They're like, they don't want to be there. They're like, okay, Brooke, ask me questions.
Yeah.
And then they're silent. And it's like, I know this is not a place you want to be, but it's a necessary evil. But if you understand that recruiters can only evaluate you on, do you appear competent,
Yes.
which strictly speaking is more competent than them,
Mm-hmm.
and do you appear excited about the role?
Mm-hmm.
If you can demonstrate that stuff quickly, the calls end early. Not only are they successful, but you get off the phone quickly. And I think that is something I think a lot of people miss the boat on. Like having a great chat with a recruiter because you both don't want to be there is a really good way to demonstrate empathy. And so, I mean, I'll tell you, I won't share the tactic here, but the tactic I've come up with so far has 100.0% pass rate over 90 plus people.
God,
so
I love that.
I've never had a client fail a recruiter screen since they started using this tactic. It takes 20 minutes to learn, and I have had clients get off the call with recruiters in 9 minutes.
Oh, this is amazing.
And so it's like, I'm not saying that the recruiter screen is the high value part of the experience, but we don't have control over that. And so the best thing we can do is find tactics that work really well, learn them. And so that is no longer an obstacle for a client. And so now if you get a callback, the odds you get to the interview are really high.
Yes.
And because it should be, if you're getting a callback from a recruiter, the odds you can move to an interview are extremely high. You just got to know how to handle that conversation.
And, you know, I love that you touched on that because it's actually really funny because for years, that was the phrase that we used whenever we were coaching our candidates. And we said confidence, competence, and likability. Like those were, I literally crafted interview homework for our recruiting firm. That's what I called it. And the truth was that if the candidate took the time, and I could always tell when they did versus when they didn't, but if they would take the time to prepare and read the words, and I know reading sucks and people don't like, Brian, they don't like to do it. It's amazing to me, but they just don't. So like I tried to condense it, but still you got to go through it, but they absolutely did so much better. I cannot claim a 100% rate, so I won't, but I'm just saying that the odds were much greater in their favor if they took the time and if they put that into practice, because you're absolutely right. I love using the word fundamental because I think that there are just some universal truths with how we do things, with how people operate. And if you can figure that out, you know, you do have the upper hand and you do have a much stronger advantage, especially in this kind of market.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's like the energy level that you bring to the conversation, you know, driving the conversation. I mean, I love recruiters. I know a lot of them, but letting them drive a conversation that's trying to evaluate your technical capability is like letting your 9-year-old niece drive your car to Costco. Like it's just a really bad idea, you know, and that's not because I think recruiters are terrible. It's just the company is charging them with doing something that doesn't really align with what they were hired to do.
Sure.
Like your ability to evaluate someone technical when you haven't done that job is really difficult.
It
And
is.
I feel for recruiters is like, we're not giving them the ingredients or the tools to be able to evaluate Brooke's background unless they can ask some questions
Mm-hmm.
that require knowing some things about front end or back end development. Like, well, when would you use SQL versus MongoDB? Like a recruiter should ideally be able to ask that and know the answer, but we don't give them enough time to go learn that stuff. We don't train them how to do that stuff.
Most recruiters aren't equipped with that, and
They're not.
I'll honestly translate with that too. Is like, again, my career, we worked with manufacturing engineers, right? I have never spent a day in a manufacturing operation in person.
Yeah,
Like I have not, but I will say, and it took, for me, just full transparency, it took me a few years to like really understand the jargon and not just blowing out air, honestly, sometimes with
Yeah.
whenever I was talking to engineers who were very technically inclined and, did know everything. And I'd be like,
Now,
because,
like, imagine that company had like a 1 day training where
right.
they just said, like, look, you're going to go to the plant in the morning. You're going to walk around with your hard hat on. You're going to come back. You're going to talk to 2 or 3 people that work there that are cool with chatting. They're going to answer some stupid questions because you don't know what the right answers, the questions are to ask. Then you're going to come back and you're going to watch these things. I mean, even 1 day of training would make a huge difference
Totally
in
agree.
recruiters being able to do a really good job at this and feel more confident, but we just don't prioritize that. We just don't.
I think this crosses over multiple industries, Brian. I think that a lot of how we operate in corporate America with our hiring system, it sucks. Like it's not prioritized the way it should be. The cost of a mishire, astronomical. If you hire the wrong person and it doesn't work out, it costs you so much more money to then go find a replacement. Like it is these business things. And, I have worked with some of the top largest manufacturing companies in the US, and some of them they treated it like it was like pulling teeth, to get them to just woo the candidate a little bit. That some of them were really hard to find. Like it wasn't like, I'm just saying, your typical friend, and it was like something very specialized. I'm like, listen, I got one guy for you. So let's smile, let's play lovey-dovey with each other. Gosh, it's just interesting. It's interesting to me to have been kind of on the flip side, working in some markets where it was really hard to find a candidate willing to leave or even talk, to someone for an interview. And then now being in an environment where I'm surrounded by, unfortunately quite the opposite, and people just really trying to make things happen. And that's a part of why I really enjoy doing the show, is I get to speak with people who know what they're talking about and hopefully help provide value and help people who are trying to navigate this career, and cheer on the people who want to break into it too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Now I got to share one more thing with
you. Please do.
Keep talking about all the things that are in my slide decks here. All right.
I'm so sorry.
It's all right. No, it's perfect. So like some people have seen this meme before. It's like the technical interview feels like Godzilla fighting King Kong. And then the real job is like inflatable T-Rex costumes and playing in the snow in a parking lot. And it's because it's true. And it's because of a point you just made. Employees are terrified, like pants crapping nightmare fuel terrified of like making a bad hire, like what we call false positive, right? Because if they hire Evil Brooke, right? And Evil Brooke comes in and she pisses off a top performer, and the top performer leaves and the morale gets cut, it drops, and then the manager gets in trouble for not like managing Brooke out or terminating her. Mm-hmm. Some of those are unrecoverable events, right? Like people are leaving with so much internal knowledge. Like you can't just find someone who has 5 years of experience working at Zillow. They may have experience working at Redfin or at a Compass, but it doesn't mean they understand the internal system. So you lose people. It takes a year to sometimes build back up that knowledge. And so, people look at this and say, they should fix it. It's unfair. And I'm like, it is unfair, but they don't want to fix it. Like, that's not the point. Like, have you seen Dodgeball, the movie? Like, have you seen Dodgeball? So like Patches O'Houlihan grabs a bag of wrenches and he's throwing it at people. And he's like, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball, right? It's like, that is the approach for technical interviewers, because since confidence in the results is expensive and our process is pretty terrible at producing consistent results, it is intellectual hazing to mitigate the risk of hiring the wrong person. That's why it's unfair, because the odds that you can pass the interview at this level and not do a much easier job, the odds of that are virtually zero.
Right.
So they're minimizing false positives and being okay with false negatives. There are plenty of people who get interviewed that could do the job, and yet they want to hire the one that gives them the least amount of risk, or maybe someone who's willing to accept 120,000 even though they probably deserve more money than that, but that's what the job is paying, and you happen to catch them when they got unemployed. Any of those type of things. And so I think it's important we understand there's no incentive for an employer to want to make this fair. And it's really expensive to make the process consistent and accurate. And so when we understand why it's unfair, it's a little easier to navigate.
Love that. That's very, very well put. Also, I'm sorry we just happen to be on the same frequency and covering the same topics async, because I didn't know you had that prepared. So that I think that's fantastic. Yeah. But
it means we both must be right. I mean, clearly we're geniuses, so we're amazing.
Listen to us, everybody. We have all the answers. So with some of the more senior professionals that you work with, I know you say you work with engineers on all kinds of a spectrum as far as stages of their career, but the more senior you get, first of all, and this applies in any industry, there are fewer senior roles. There just are that companies can only hire so many managers, so many directors, right? So
yeah,
it does get a lot more competitive. And then at that point, the candidates generally are similar across the board. I'm talking about years of experience, right? Even if it's different backgrounds or whatever. So how can they best differentiate themselves when you're approaching that level? What are you seeing that really helps them stand out?
Yeah. So there is a phase in anyone's career, and I'm just going to use tech career because that's the part that we're talking about that I'm more comfortable with. The first 3 to 5 years of your experience, you are very grateful to have a job. Even if it's not this market, you're still grateful to have a job. If you're graduating with a CS degree, and I met a guy on LinkedIn yesterday who has a job lined up, I'm like, wow, you should be really grateful, because there's a lot of people with 7 years of experience who've been unemployed for 2 years. And so the fact that you have a job, that's really meaningful. Around the 3 to 5 year mark, which I would assert you probably need a minimum of 3 to 5 years of experience to be senior plus, you have to stop treating the interview like a test. Okay. And so I think there is a sense when you're less experienced that you have to treat it like the SAT. However, the more experience you have, the more depth you have in things that are different than other people that are applying, because you've been in the industry longer. So sometimes we call this T-shaped and M-shaped people. T-shaped people have a little bit of knowledge across a wide breadth and then a single amount of depth in one area. Mm-hmm. When you get to senior and staff, you start to develop multiple tines. So the T starts to look like an M because there's 3 or more tines going down. And so we have to treat, when you become more experienced, it becomes more about finding the right shaped job for you. Right. So with 4 to 5 years of experience, I start saying, if Brooke was a client and she came to me, the first thing we would do is walk through what Brooke is good at. And I don't really trust Brooke or me to come up with a really good set of those questions. So I use a survey to do that. It's called Clifton Strengths. I've used it with 200 people so far in my career.
Love it.
I walked a lot of people through it. I've built content on top of it specifically for the tech industry, interview questions related to your top 5 strengths.
That's cool.
Ideal environment criteria for you to prioritize the whole thing. And so when you have experience, it's like sitting down and treating it like career Tinder, right? It is
okay.
They are going to evaluate you, but you have to ask enough questions to get a signal without telling them what the right answer is about whether this job is Brooke shaped or not. And so what we need to do is find a way for you to get enough information to know if you will be successful there. Mm-hmm. But the people who are successful at a place like an Amazon, which is not me, I would fail miserably at Amazon because I know enough about myself, are not the same people that will succeed at a Coinbase or a Zillow or a Microsoft or a Qualtrics or any of these other companies. And so knowing what your strengths are is you are this puzzle piece. And then the job is do a really good job in the interview explaining what your strengths are through storytelling. And
Mm-hmm.
if those stories resonate,
Mm-hmm.
there's a real high likelihood that they value the strengths you bring to your role. It's like a currency that they accept, right? And so with senior people, it's really like, I want to give you the clarity to go into an interview and tell them things at a level of detail that could potentially make them not want to have a second date with you, right? Like, I'm not religious. I have 6 kids. I don't want more kids.
Yeah.
That may be incompatible with the person sitting across the table. But what I want to do is teach people how to show up when they're experienced and say, this is the kind of person I am. This is the kind of environment I thrive in. Now let's have a conversation about whether or not this is a good fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
About whether what you're offering is a Brooke shaped job. Like, is it shaped like Brooke?
That is so thoughtful and very well put. I love that you brought up the Clifton Strength Finders. I did that a few years ago, and I thought that was one of the neatest things I've done. So I'm very familiar with that. And that is, man, I love how customized too your approaches in addressing people's needs. It's very much not a slapping on a one size fits all. And there's something very valuable in that, and really
Yeah,
helping people hone in on their strengths. Because a lot of people don't, I think, necessarily even think about things like this,
they don't.
with their own stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So I really love that. And so, of course, you are the founder of Refactor Coaching. But as a wrapping up, you also have come out with techoffers.io. And I wanted to touch on that. That's your new program that you have. It's 4 weeks. Is that correct?
Yeah. So after helping 80 or 90 people land tech jobs, I started to see consistency in the tactics that were working well. And unsurprisingly, because I'm more confident and I've helped more people, my rates of working with me have gone up.
Of
And
course.
in a current market like this, there's a catch 22, which is like, well, I'm unemployed. I can't afford to pay you, but I want to work with you so that I can get a job so I can pay you. Like, what do we do? And so about 2 or 3 months ago, I said, well, what if I offered, instead of one-on-one coaching as being my only offering, what if I offered group coaching where people could learn these tactics basically through watching a lot of videos that I've created, and then getting together and having weekly group sessions to walk through the tactics and answer people's questions, jump on a Discord with the other people that are in the course, support each other, talk about tactics that are working and the progress they're making. And so techoffers.io is what that is. And so I'm really excited about it because it means I can expand the number of people I can help, and I'm not limited by my calendar capacity, for one.
Yes.
2, it's 75% less than working with me one-on-one. Okay. So it is very affordable compared to like one-on-one coaching. And because it's video content, I'm able to help people that are not just based in the US. And so I have students in Brazil and Switzerland and India and a few other places, even in my very first cohort. And so I'm really excited to be able to scale my ability to help other people without me being the blocking issue. So if people are interested in more info about that, they can go to techoffers.io. It connects to the Stand store that I have for my group coaching. And I have a cohort coming up. I'm happy to offer a discount code to the people listening here. So if you sign up and use coupon code industry25, you can get 30% off the price that's listed there. That's
so very generous. Yeah.
It is limited, like, because this is my second cohort. I am limiting it to 20 students because I'm not here to create 400 people and feel like I can't answer individual questions. Going from one-on-one to group, I want to make sure it's successful for everybody that's there. And that means capping the number of people that are involved. So if people are interested, I encourage them to go take a look at that early and sign up there, because the course starts in about 2 weeks.
Okay, perfect. And I will have all of the links, everything, all of that information is going to be in the description wherever this is posted. So anyone just scroll a little bit, you'll see it, and you'll be able to go right to it. I really want to commend you, Brian, for your passion about helping people just comes across as very genuine, and that's something I really appreciate and also resonate with. And as someone who very much operates as like a one-woman band for now, I understand how difficult it is to scale things, especially whenever there is so much that you want to do. And so I really commend you for recognizing the limits of, like you said, adding a cap, and also realizing that it gives you access to helping people in other parts of the world because of time zone issues. Oh my gosh, like I understand. And that can be a really, really difficult thing to do. So that's awesome. That's really impressive, my friend. I think this is very, very exciting. So everyone listening, definitely, if you're in a position, I think Brian is an excellent resource for the one-on-one coaching, excuse me, to really maximize your potential and where you're at. I think, especially in this market, if you're looking for someone who's really going to be in your corner, help you identify really your strengths and what is actually going to be a long-term good fit for you. I mean, you absolutely should look at it as an investment in your career, and it can change the trajectory of everything. And for those who are unfortunately also very struggling in this market, definitely check out Tech Offers. Thank you, Brian, for the offer of the discount. That is extremely generous, and I'm very excited. So I hope people find it helpful and educational too. And I know also the Discord community, I just want to plug that. I think that that's actually a really great bonus. And I say that because I have a lot of one-on-one chats, Brian, with people in this industry, and a lot of people don't network quite like I do. And it can be a very isolating experience and very frustrating. And it's, especially with how hard it is and just getting like one rejection or worse, not hearing anything, like we need each other, and the exchange of ideas and the support is priceless. So having access to that, as well as Brian's beautiful brain and all of his glorious diagrams and videos, that's pretty powerful. So
I mean, I was laid off from my first tech job and my last tech job, and I had a 26-year career in between. And my first layoff experience was very lonely and very isolating. You know, I think a lot of people in tech, their social circle is like largely created by the people they work with. So you don't just lose coworkers, you lose the people you go to lunch with and the people you sometimes go to drinks with after work, you know, back when people saw each other in person. And so it's not just the loss of a paycheck, it's the loss of a social community. And so making sure there's a place where people can share tactics with each other and actually just support each other when things aren't going well. There's a lot of people going through this, and I think it's just kind of helps normalize it and say, man, if 6,000 people can get laid off like from Microsoft this week,
I know,
and some of those people had 25 years of experience, you shouldn't feel bad if it's hard to get a job when you only have 2 or 3 years of experience, because there's a lot of people struggling just like you are.
There are. And just on that side note too, something I'm always, I feel like, shouting from the rooftops at this point is the chunk of my audience that is working on breaking into tech, whether that means you're in school, in a boot camp, exploring self-learning. There are so many options and avenues too, but I tell people, don't isolate. Don't do it. Don't do it with your classmates, you know, and that be your only resource. Like, please talk to people on LinkedIn, reach out. Honestly, most people want to help. We crave community. We want to connect, and especially in times like this. And also, when you do that, you never know what door might open too. Someone may know of an opportunity, and guess what? You're the person that comes to their mind because you're the one that took some initiative, and that's going to stand out and serve you well no matter what.
Oh yeah. I remember a story where, I'll give you a quick story. I know we got to go, but
sure.
When I was doing vendor work as a contractor for Microsoft at a company called Solutions IQ, and my contract was coming to an end. And I didn't really take this approach because I thought I would get a job, but like something very simple I do ended up creating an opportunity for me to get a job. So I talked to my boss and I said, what are you going to do with this machine, like this PC? Because back then we used, towers. And I said, what are you going to do with this? Because I like it and I would love to have it at home, but I don't have one at home. And he said, well, it's just going to go back into storage. And I said, what do you think about bartering extra time, like in exchange, instead of paying me, you just give me this PC? And I was like, is that like legit? I'm asking, like, this could be breaking the law. So I was like, I was like, is this above water? Like, is there a way we could do this where you won't get in trouble? And he's like, well, I'm the director of IT. Let me go look at a few things. And he looks at it and he goes like, no, we can totally do this. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I just had a Post-it note, like on my desk, like checking off the hours that I worked. And I think it was like 35 hours, to get enough to pay for the thing. Because I was there another week, I was there for the holiday party. And because these people were not fancy. We had the holiday party at the office, and I met someone named Janice who I'd seen in the hallway at the holiday party, and she told me about a job openings that she was trying to interview for. And it was like, I would not have had that experience to convert from contractor to like a full-time employee for this consulting company had I not made that deal.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it because I thought I would get a job.
Oh, sure.
Like I did it because I was just trying to find a creative way to gain more experience.
Mm-hmm.
But that job, being in that company, led to another consulting work with another vendor. And that vendor, the FTE sponsor, was a guy who wanted to hire me at Microsoft. And in fact, he wanted to hire an analyst, but they wouldn't let him. So he lied and said that it was an analytics PM job just so that he could get around the requirement of
Wow.
like hiring me as a PM, but all I did was analyst work. And so, you know, I'm not here to say that you look at my career, you think I earned a lot of this stuff. It's like, no way, man. Like, you know, I did not justify $600,000 a year at Coinbase. No way. Like I got really lucky with people wanting me to be there. And
Right.
a lot of these stepping stones happen because of people, like
Yes.
you're saying, Brooke. It's like knowing people
Yes.
is like the superpower.
It is.
And I know it's not comfortable.
It's
but
not.
The reason it's uncomfortable is why you will succeed where other people won't. So you got to lean into the discomfort because most people don't do that. Right.
That right there, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to turn into a reel because that was like the golden bit of this episode, in my opinion. But because it's so true, it's absolutely true, and it is the biggest differentiator. And to be honest, because of that very thing, I, with no college education, and I'm not a software genius. I mean, I know some stuff, and I'm continuing to learn. But it's like, now I host a tech podcast. I get to talk to top people. Some of my mentors work for big tech, like the connections that I have organically from being vulnerable and sending that DM, even though I was genuinely terrified to. That's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
But it's that human connection because it's people who are making these decisions and allowing this to happen. So it's, I can't state that enough. Very powerful stuff, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, hey, I want to say, thank you so much for coming on the show. Such a great conversation. And so everybody, yes, please connect with Brian Pulliam on LinkedIn. I will, of course, have all of his links, as I said in the description. Check out Refactor Coaching and also the techoffers.io as well. And feel free to reach out to him with any questions or me as well. And check out the discount code that will also be in there too. Don't miss out. The cohort is starting soon. This episode will go up before it starts, so that won't be a problem. And Brian, thank you so much for your time.
Of course, happy to help.
And everybody that's tuned in, we will see you next week. Thank you so much.